It is my honor to introduce a distinguished African human rights champion and constitutional lawyer. Brian Kagoro is a renowned Zimbabwean activist who has dedicated his life to justice and constitutional reform. He has also served as a consultant for several regional organizations, including the African Union Commission, NEPAD, the New Partnership for Africa's Development, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Mr. Brian Kagoro is the founder of the Crisis in Zimbabwean Coalition, where he served as both spokesperson and national coordinator. He is also a board member of the Amani Trust and serves as a legal advisor to the Zimbabwean Congress of Trade Unions. In addition to his activism, he is an accomplished academic, having published numerous articles on Zimbabwean and global politics. Please welcome with a round of applause, Mr. Brian Kagoro.
I only brought the iPad in order to impress a colleague of mine who thinks I'm a technophobe. To our hosts, allow me to thank you for this platform and its significance not only for Nigeria, but for the continent. I wanted to start off by a story. When all is done, I'll have given you 2 stories, 3 proverbs, and if you remember nothing else, please do remember the stories and the proverb. My father told me a story of a caretaker in a school who was told that their primary job was to lock the gate every day at 6 p.m. so that the thieves don't come in. And for almost 20, 30 years, the caretaker faithfully locked the gate every day at 6 p.m. and the school was kept safe. And then it happened as society developed that the thieves in the local area came and stole the fence. After the thieves had stolen the fence, the caretaker continued to lock the gate at 6 p.m. So one of the things I will say, and in agreement with what Charles said earlier, is be careful not to lock the gate when there's no more fence. The second story I wanted to tell you is a fairly simple story. There is a king somewhere in Africa who wanted succession, and the king went to 3 mentees and gave them a seed and said to them, there will be one single determinant that will be voted for by the whole community of who my successor will be. And that determination will be based on the following. I have given each of you a seed. The one who has the tallest tree at the end of 2 years will become my successor. So it happened, the chaps took the seed and they went and planted it. Everyone discovered after some time there was no germination. And so people became creative. 2 of the contestants went and said, this is a seed of a common tree in the village. My seed is not growing. How will the king know that I swapped the seed? So they went and found alternative seeds. And of course, they grew into very tall trees. The one chap was just watching the seed, but the seed was not growing. After the 2-year period, they all went back to the king, and the 2 chaps were proud because the trees had grown significantly, and the one chap was distraught and morose and went and said, oh, well, look, I know I'm now no longer in the race. And the king looked at the trees in amazement and said, well done, your tree has grown so tall. And to the other, wow, yours has grown tall and a little bit wide. And then he went to the last person and said, and you have nothing to show. And he says, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, Ogasa. The seed you gave me did not grow. I watered it, I put it in the right soil. And then the king said, I want everybody to understand, this shall be our king. Do you know why? The king said, I gave every single one of these people a boiled seed. There's no way it was going to grow. And the fact that these have grown means that they have been willing to cheat the system. The fundamental problem that we have is there are people who are willing to manufacture progress irrespective of the ethical base, the ideological base, or the moral base upon which that progress is constructed. But here is the tragedy. Nigerian youth, African youth, pastors, imams celebrate appearances of material progress, notwithstanding the basis upon which that material progress has been constructed. And I've been going around the continent saying the following, that look, we have equated status and being with having things, and so even though we are opposed to corruption, we admire those who flaunt the outputs and outcomes of corruption. Even if we are opposed to corruption, we still celebrate those who through corrupt means rise in society. The fundamental hole in the heart of Nigerian democracy is the lack of a civic and political consciousness that says the moral basis of progress matters as much as the material basis of progress. Lawyers take the bait, the bankers take the bait, scientists take the bait, everybody takes the bait, because Africa is obsessed with the disease of self-importance. So for you to look like you have something, you have to have the material things. For you to be accepted and honored, you have to have the trappings of importance. So every young person grows up aspiring to be Oga, because you will have people who serve you, you will have the things that prove it. No one dreams of building Nigeria. They don't want the corrupt version of the country, but they don't mind being corrupt if it will get them to feel and to be seen and to act important. So here is the dilemma. A conflictual relationship with money and wealth. On the one hand, we want ethics. On the other, we want money. I guess it is you Christians who say you cannot serve God and Mammon at the same time. The democratic equilibrium between values and primitive accumulation will never balance to values. It balances to primitive accumulation. And primitive accumulation always leads to show off, or what people call conspicuous consumption. That means when people are chopping at the chop, they show off that they are chopping. So society grows up with a chop mentality, and you gather us every year to discuss democracy. But democracy is being chopped every day. Now small choppers, big choppers, and from the least of society to the highest of society, now choppism is the new way. Friends, I wish we could say that in this narrative that all is lost, but not all is lost. Something happened here amongst young Nigerians that we have seen elsewhere, where young Nigerians rose up in protest against the securitization of the state. I want to suggest to you that protest and outrage is not revolution or transformation. It may be an important way to show that you are unhappy, but you cannot build the foundations of a future society on anger. Society is built on vision. And because we have robbed our young people of the opportunity to envision the Nigeria that they want, we have kept them at the bus stop of anger and outrage. So they are outraged against the system, outraged against the elders, outraged against the foreigners, outraged against anything that's different. Because what happens in the position of outrage is that you have not enough time to imagine. So history becomes the weapon that you use to fight everything and everyone. History is important to know where you have come from. But until you have a vision of a promised land, and I want to suggest to you that that promised land is much more than a constitution. Because if this beautiful country, no one stole and everyone stuck to the constitution, Nigeria will still not be as prosperous as God intended Nigeria to be. I'll tell you why. The pretense that all that it will take Africa to transform is African moralism and morality is both naive and archaic. The wealth of this continent, the oil of Nigeria, the diamonds of the Congo, the titanium, the uranium, the wealth that's under the ground of this continent is the desire of many others. And so that proverbial thing in the Abrahamic religions between Jacob and Esau, where birthright and blessing are exchanged for a bowl of soup, becomes the permanent critique of African developmentalism and African leadership. Bowl of soup for the birthright. Bowl of soup for the blessing. Why? Because our children have not been accorded the education that makes them the experts with full understanding of the value of the minerals and the agriculture, the industrial potential of their continent. They've been educated sufficiently to speak a language of pain, educated sufficiently to speak a language of despair and discontent, but not given the skills to transform the soil, to transform the minerals, to transform the oil into the benefits that their children should have. I want to suggest to the leadership in this room and to the young people in this room, God gave this continent rich agricultural soils. We have on this continent, from wildlife to plant life, what we need for our health, what we need for our welfare and well-being. But our leadership, with our conspiracy, has spent all their time trying to get a few trinkets, trying to be seen and accepted elsewhere, signing away the things that matter, signing away the future of the continent. And they are in this thing that I call a debt alcoholism. What is a debt alcoholism? You borrow to build things that will never build the future of your children. You borrow to pay salaries so that people can steal. What is debt alcoholism? It's the curse, the epistemic curse that makes you leave preeminent intellectuals like these, and you go and hire an undereducated consultant from Europe or from America because they are of a different pigmentation or they've come under recommendation. I want to suggest to you that their teachers are now here in Nigeria on retirement, and you are getting the students. Why? It is because you do not believe the value of the intellect of your own people, never mind the value of the futures of your own people. This is not a problem of politicians. So let me suggest something to you that you have thought about. Let me give you the words of what you have thought about. Number one, we have de-intellectualized African politics so that many of your major political parties don't have a policy and research wing, and yet they are responsible for making policies, from IT policy to policing policy to AI policy. How are they making policy without research and police wings? Many people who want to be governors, who want to rule, do not have the research competencies or the data that backs them up. I'll tell you how they hope to make it. Through power, through popularity, through political beauty pageantry, through accumulating enough money, whether from corruption or other means, to pay their way to power. Once they've paid their way to power, they realize, it is good to be here, but they are unable to do anything, and the masses are demanding performance. What is the solution? I want to suggest to you that political parties and those contending for political office need to have credible backing of knowledge, of data, of science. Number one, we cannot de-intellectualize politics and hope that the governance will be intellectual. Number two, if we are framing governance on the basis of who and what we want to be in the future, a future dominated by technology, by artificial intelligence. And this country has produced in MIT and other global entities that look at technology, some of the leading students. But those students are not advising the government. Those students are not directing policy. I'll tell you why. There is always a gulf between knowledge and complacent, self-indulgent power. There is always a gulf between imagination of the future and contentment with the present. This country needs to learn how to harvest its most diverse and rich intellectual class to do two things. You have to link the intellectuals to the masses. Why? Because the intellectuals have floated away wanting to be proximate to the West, wanting to be proximate to European, American, and other traditions. They've floated away from the mass of the Nigerian people and brilliant overseas. Like we say in the village here in Nigeria, if you are a lizard in your own home, you can't be a crocodile elsewhere. So I'm calling the lizards, please be crocodiles in Nigeria, so that the link between the mass of the Nigerian people, immiserated by corruption, by underdevelopment, by deindustrialization, and the elite of this country that is honored globally for its brilliance, can be bridged by a compassion. Because what is at the heart of African misgovernance is heart failure, Pastor Pocho. The lack of compassion for the other, because the pursuit of personal brilliance has so dominated what we do in our education and elsewhere. So my solution, remarry the intellectuals with the masses. Not simply to protest against governments, no, but to fashion the Nigeria that works, the Nigeria that prospers, the Nigeria that is peaceful. It will not happen as long as you have a fragmentation between the old and the young, the intellectuals and the broad mass of the people, the working class and the elite, because that fragmentation will create an ocean of discontent and insecurity. But if you want to reconstruct security that is mindful, Charles, of the social determinants of health, of education, and etc., you have to remarry people, show the house to the house, show people back to each other. I wanted to suggest to you that because others have designs on us, others have designs on this beautiful country, development of Nigeria has to be a consciousness of how big Nigeria is. Now, I want you to understand, nothing happens by accident. There is a Shona proverb where I come from that says, if a cat wants to be a lion, it must get rid of its obsession or appetite for rats. Let me repeat. If a cat wants to be a lion, it must lose its voracious appetite for rats. What has dominated Nigerian politics, and I read it from far, and I accept that idealism grows with one's distant from the problem, is this Premier League of pettiness, that national dialogue can be preoccupied with this Premier League of pettiness, and the substantive issues of the day are never debated, and we're debating this one and so and so and so and so. The election comes and goes, and the debate is about personality and petty things, and not about the grand greatness of how does the cat become a lion, and I'm saying lose the appetite for rats. Nigerian youth won't be employed by intention. Nigerian youth will be employed by strategy. Nigerian youth won't be employed by speeches. Nigerian youth require Nigeria to industrialize. For Nigeria to industrialize, it won't happen in Abuja and Lagos only, or in Kano only. That means the whole country becomes a unit for mobilizing the continent, for mobilizing the country for its own economic transformation. I want to suggest to you that the worst form of failure does not happen as a result of mediocrity. It happens when brilliance is not coordinated. Let me repeat. The worst failure is not when you have mediocrity in power. It is when brilliance is not coordinated. All the brilliant people are feuding. No one wants to be led by the other. The brilliant ideas are never implemented because someone is waiting for the perfect idea. And it also depends on who has come up with the idea. I want to suggest to you that it is about time we realize that the same way the clock has been winding down for me, the world won't wait forever for Nigeria to cease being a cat and become a lion, to stop being a lizard and become a crocodile. This country has some of the most talented people. This country has some of the wealthiest soils. This country has many things that are needed. But this country also faces an insecurity born out of neglect. Let me repeat, an insecurity born out of neglect. In a country where you have more billionaires than London, it is surprising that this country, the border with Niger, almost 2,000 miles, nobody watches it. There are parts of this country that people were saying are ungoverned. And my friend Dr. Eze for years has been saying to me, they are alternatively governed. Because power, whether it's formal or informal, it hates a vacuum. So you are calling them militia. They only filled a space where no one was showing care. Now I want to suggest that that thing that I called heart failure, the lack of compassion, essentially means, let's realize, when you go to a Nigerian police station, you enter records manually. We are using analog policing to deal with a country that has produced Yahoo boys. I mean, can you reconcile reality and reality? How are you going to track Yahoo boys using a criminal report book 1? You know, because I'm a guest, my surname is Kagoro and I could be from Kaduna, let me be kind and say, in essence, Nigeria has no choice but to move quickly to ensuring that e-governance, digital governance, and its ability to track digital risks to this country is enhanced. And thank you for providing that. But in essence, what does it mean? It means retraining the police, retraining components of the intelligence, retraining components of military intelligence. The governance crisis is not a failure of process, of procedure, and institution. It is the active sabotage. Remember I said you de-intellectualize politics, you also de-intellectualize governance. But there is a gap between the governance frames we inherited from our colonial masters and where the country is. Can I tell you what that gap is? The governance forms where representative politics was seen as adequate no longer suffices, because young people don't only define their demos based on the state they come from. They define their demos based on who they associate with, their social connections and networks. So who and how you represent young people cannot only simply be from Ekiti, Akwa Ibom, or so. No. Representative democracy must be reimagined and reimagined radically. Without that reimagination, we'll continue to manufacture people, my size, my age, with the level of stomach that I have and comfort that I have. And the young people will continue to rebel. They are not rebelling simply because we are inadequate. They are rebelling because we're obsolete. What we're trying to govern and where they are going are two different universes. And let me repeat what you said, Charles. They are not going to Sokoto. They are coming to Lagos. And now the problem of trying to take them to Sokoto, because that's the appropriate way of doing things, the appropriate procedure, even wearing wigs that are white and gowns and looking the same as our colleagues in the UK, that's not where the young people are going. That's where you and I were going. They are going elsewhere. In fact, they are no longer just going to Lagos. They're going to space. They are going somewhere fundamentally different that our imagination could not capture, because we had been trained to simply imagine sovereignty within the confines of our states. We had been trained to imagine prosperity in one way. We never thought people could make wealth out of something called digital. I want us to admit, we who run our countries are only 4% of the population. The majority median age, 19. It essentially means there is a gulf not only between the systems and the people, but those who are running the countries are now a dangerous minority, not just an echo chamber. The number of Nigerians above the age of 64 is less than 7%. The number of people in Nigeria above the age of 64 in power is the majority. Go figure. I come from Southern Africa. We're run by a white minority, which was between 3 and 5%. We knew the dangers of minority rule. I want to suggest to the eldership, we have become the dangerous minority rulers. Until we get minority status, which is not just a numerical or age-based minority. It is a minority status that also takes this into account. Number one, we have monetized and financialized politics. So the outraged young people can't enter because they have no money. They have no money because they have not stolen enough. They have no money because we have no industries for them to produce enough. They have no money because we have sabotaged the economy so that it depends on someone who knows someone who knows someone else. And they come from families where they don't know anyone. And they want Nigeria to work whether you know someone or you don't know someone. My friend Ben, I asked him, what would be different? He said, Brian, I just want a Nigeria where I can succeed, not because I know someone. Well, how do we create a Nigeria where you succeed, not because you know someone? It's not just the systems and institutions. I want to suggest that we need new systems, but we need new leaders. We can't get new leaders without a new leadership pipeline. We can't get a new leadership pipeline constructed only out of outrage. A new leadership pipeline has to have the values of the future, the competencies and the skills required in the future, the foresight of the future, the global perspective of the future. Now, if we can't do that, I want to suggest something to you. We cannot continue to ignore Nigerian women and hope that the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, and everybody else is going to recognize them as leaders, because the chickens will come home to roost. You will have a generational divide between the young and the old. You will have a gendered divide between the women and the men. But you will have another divide. Someone is now telling you that you should fight on the basis of faith. I want to say to Nigeria, you people who are in faith, you are no longer the sole merchants of hope. People are, the number of unchurched Nigerians is now grown by over 44% in 3 decades. That means Nigerians will neither go to the mosque or to the church, even for a country that's more than 80% religious. Be careful that you do not end up with a situation where the value base of society is determined solely by the internet and by anger. The greatest threat to democracy is not the theft of elections, as bad as that is. It's not the corruption in the elections. The greatest threat to democracy is when intellectually we become dependent on forms that never serve the future of our people. Let me end with this story. They built the Great Wall of China in order to keep out the northern invaders. Then after some time, the invasion started. It's because when the fathers were building the Great Wall, they did not teach their children ethics. And in the end, the northern invaders figured out how to bribe the gatekeepers. Your society's gatekeepers, if you neglect them today, this country will pay the consequences in the future. God bless you.